All right, so I'm going to share my screen. Where is that screen? Okay, so you should, whose face can I see? Chris, can you see the MLS on your screen? Okay, perfect. So first and foremost, there are lots of different places to pull stats. I will tell you that my personal preference is to go into the MLS and run each of the stats that I'm looking for by hand, instead of clicking on reports, right? There's these market reports up here, or going into something like Brokermetrics and having the report just done for you. And part of the reason I like to pull my own stats is because it keeps my brain plugged in to what is actually happening and driving the market, right? So there may be simpler ways to pull the stats that I'm going to show you how to pull here. I encourage you to use the MLS because it allows you to understand exactly what it is. When you have to actually click the criteria and ask for results, it allows you to get firsthand information directly from the system that ultimately tracks all this stuff for us, and allows you then a level of, now that I have these numbers, how am I going to interpret them? What are they actually saying to me? So I find personally that I learn better by doing this by hand, which is why I encourage every single time you meet with a seller, don't just look at last week's numbers. Don't look at the numbers that were given at the beginning of the month for the previous month on a Zoom call. Dive in and run these to make sure that you have up to the minute stats, and your brain is now being challenged to say, okay, well, what are these really telling me? What does this say? How can I use this as a tool? How can I make sure that the sellers or buyers I'm presenting this information to use it as a tool? Does that make sense to everybody? So in the MLS, I always work from here, the cross-property search, because it has everything available to me. If you get down here into single family and co-op or multifamily, you then have to leave that screen to go and run some of the other property types. So I do everything out of cross-property search because for all intents and purposes, it gives me everything I'm looking for. And that cross-property search looks like this. So let's start with the couple of things that I always run per town each month, right? And those things are closed units, listings taken, median sale price, days on market, and list to sale ratio. So it's those 5 metrics that I typically work with when I'm looking to see what's going on in a particular area. So the first thing you have to decide is, do you want the entire market, which to me kind of says that, single family condos, multis, and lots and land? Or are you working with a seller who owns a single family house, in which case the single family world is probably more relevant, right? I think if you're looking for an overview of a market, you need to know why you're looking at the overview. So when I give you guys stats each month, I do single family, condo, multi, and land, right? To just kind of round out the whole, because you're each working in a different segment of the market. When you're pulling these for your own listing purposes, you'll know whether or not you need to figure out single family numbers or condo numbers. And here's the interesting part, is that sometimes single family numbers and condo numbers can be very, very different, right? Sometimes very much the same, and sometimes very much different. So don't be afraid to get specific if specific is called for based on the scenario that you are looking looking to move forward in. So let's just take single families now, and somebody spin the wheel of towns and tell me what town we should do. Go ahead, somebody tell me which. Say it again.
Ridgefield.
Okay, I heard Ridgefield first, so we'll use Ridgefield as an example, right? So you've got single family chosen over here. You've got the county of Fairfield and the town of Ridgefield. And so the very first thing that I will do is figure out what period of time I am going to look at and what period of time I'm comparing it to. And so generally speaking, the active button is pushed when you come into this screen. You need to get rid of the active button because for most of what you're looking at, you're going to go with closed, right? Because closed is the rear view mirror. Now this says 0 minus 365, so that's going 12 months back. What I typically do is run January 1st through today, and I compare it to January 1st through the same day last year, right? Instead of just looking at what the last year has brought us, I do a year over year comparison. And so what you do is you'll run this year. I always run this year first, just because. And so that's 1/1/21 plus. So that'll bring you right through to today. And then you'll notice that there are 248 matches. By the way, just as a quick thought for you, if you're trying to get county-wide results, here's what happens. So if you get rid of the city, look what happens to the matches. This time of year, it's already over 5,000, and the system won't return more than 5,000 results at a time. So what I do is I break it down and I do like the first 3 months of the year, and then I do the next 2 months and the next 2 months. And then I add it all together, which is a real pain. And yet, if you want county-wide results, after about March or April, the numbers are typically more than 5,000. And so that you're limited to what those searches will actually give you in terms of accuracy. Just as an aside. So let's go back to pulling Ridgefield. And so now you have closed from the first of the year forward for the town of Ridgefield in Fairfield County. You're going to leave all of this empty because you're not concerned about who listed it, who did what with it, doesn't matter, right? And you're going to click on results. The results will bring you this page. And towards the bottom of this page, you should see this little button here called stats. Everyone see that? So you click on stats and it'll ask you either for charts or tabular. I always go to the tabular piece. And when you go to tabular, it gives you this, which I just call the box, right? And when you pull a box for a certain town, a lot of the information that you're looking for that period of time in that town shows up right here in this box. By the way, if you ever get here and you forgot which year you're looking at, the data, the criteria, excuse me, is right down here at the bottom. I don't know, when I highlight things, do you see that turn blue at the bottom? Oh, good. So you can always just refer down here. Am I doing single family? Am I doing this year or last year? So if you ever forget, which I do all the time, I always just look down here to make sure I'm writing my numbers in the right column on my little piece of paper. So the numbers that I'm going to pull from here are, again, Ridgefield so far this year, so that's 2021. You've got closed units, and the closed units number is right here, it's 248. You've got median sale price, which is right here. So you've got median closed price, so that number is right there, right? So you've got 783. And yes, I typically just round. So you've got 783,000 as the median sale price. You've got days on market. So I use then average days on market, which here is 64. And list to sale ratio. So list to sale ratio is going to be the average close price and the average list price, right? Now they do it for you over here. That says selling price to listing price, this right here. That's what that means. I always do my own math because I find sometimes the math that they do is rounded weirdly. And so I want to know what the exact number is because I want to be able to use it as specifically as I possibly can. And so the way you get list to sale ratio is you take the closed price of 928 and you divide it by the list price of 927 and you get 100.1%. Everyone see what I did there? Now, in this case, the 100 would have been just fine. Again, sometimes to me, you get like 97.6 and they round it up to 100. However, if the town is 97, if the town is 99.6 and my personal numbers are 100.1, well, that's a 0.5% difference that I want to be able to discuss with my sellers, right? List with me tonight because at a $700,000 price point, I'm putting $3,500 more in your pocket immediately based on my list to sale ratio as opposed to the rest of the town. If everything just averages to 100%, well, then there's no conversation to be had because everyone's the same.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Do we take the average here or the median?
I use average for everything except sale price. That's where I use the median.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So there's 4 out of the 5 metrics right from this box. Any questions on where I just pulled and what I just pulled and how I got to this box? No? Okay, do remember I can't see most of you anymore because I'm sharing my screen. So
no questions, Rick, but I'm wondering why the line above that says 133 when it looks like it should be under, looking at the list to close. Looks like it's 7.3 million and the close was 6.6. Wouldn't that be under 100?
So that's not average, right? You're looking at the max line.
Oh, okay, got it, okay.
Yeah, I kind of wish the lines were a little clearer, but they're not.
Okay, got it.
So yeah, there's other information here that frankly gets confusing. You know, if you want to know the lowest price that's sold so far, it's 265. The highest price that's sold is 6.6, right? But the actual list to sale here is this line. It's the average sale price. Or else you're just looking at, so this particular property, what this says is the highest sale price in Ridgefield so far this year was listed for 7.3 and sold for 6.6. Sorry, yes, that's right.
So Rick, can I just ask a question about this? So let's say, let's grab another town as an example, just for just argument's sake. If you're looking at just Stanford's a big town. If you're going to take all of Stanford, you know, those prices are going to be skewed depending on what part of Stanford you're buying in. Could you do it by section of town, like I don't know, North Stanford as and run this analysis on, or in Greenwich, let's say just Riverside, or does it have to be the whole town?
Sure, great question. And so let's go back. And so now I've changed things to say Stanford, right? And so what you know about the MLS is that you do have over here this search by neighborhood option, right? And so in a city like Stanford that's larger and has some more specific pockets to pricing than perhaps a smaller town like Ridgefield does, which is 100% valid, right? You've got the Cove versus Westover versus North Stanford versus Chapin. You could decide to run the numbers based on everything in Chapin, right? So if you take a look, you go from 488 units down to just Chapin, which is now 31 units. And if you click results for just Chapin, you have the same stats, you have the same tabular choice, you get the same box, and it'll give you just the data on Chapin specifically. Or North Stamford, if you so choose there, right? There's 154 of the matches. Again, you run the same thing, results, stats, tabular, and you get those numbers. Now, here's the only thing I caution you about. Doing it that way assumes that all listing agents have gone ahead and put in the actual neighborhood where the property is located. And I can tell you from actual hardcore previous and present experience, that is not the case a lot of times, right? Oftentimes agents will do as little as possible to get the listing up and live, and they don't put in this information. So you could be missing enough of a sample of the market that it's skewing the numbers.
Also, Rick, sometimes they put in the wrong neighborhoods. Like in Weston, they'll call things Lower Weston that are so far north it's laughable.
Yeah, exactly right. It's like you want to send them a dictionary and actually outline for them what lower actually means, right? So agreed. So even worse, and I think the point that Dana makes is even more relevant than my point. So not only do you have missing issues, but you have wrong things in there. And so if it's a house that was supposed to be in Newfield that shows up in North Stamford and it happens to be a really high price point, well, now you're skewing the numbers in such a way that it may come back to bite you. If in fact you are interested in being as exact as possible. And Neil's point about larger cities having larger numbers and working a little differently by neighborhood is also a fact. There is no, unfortunately, I'm not here to say, here's the solution to that, right? What I'm here to say is you have to kind of figure out where you're looking. In smaller towns, it's easy just to use the entire town. In larger cities, you'll have to decide, maybe run them both ways and see how different they are, run the whole city and then run the neighborhood, see how different they are, and make some decisions about what you'll use. Make sense?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, Tony,
Are you going to get into radius search?
say it again.
Were you going to talk about radius search? Like if you were doing something for a specific property, or are we just covering towns and neighborhoods?
Yeah, so we're really just covering,
Okay,
just covering.
never mind, I'm
towns.
sorry.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
so certainly, however, the same thing applies if you're doing a radius search, right? And I'm assuming you're talking about this up here, like within 5 miles of wherever. Sorry, Tony, I was on a different screen. Was that what you were talking about?
Yes, it was, and I'm sorry, I kind of assumed
Yeah, so what Tony's talking about is you can go here and do, I want to just have within 5 miles of wherever, right? And type in an address and it'll do that, that radius search. So you can run the same numbers for that, right? However, just remember, well, that actually wouldn't be so bad. All right, I'm not going to say what I was going to say because it's not really relevant. Okay, so where were we? We were doing some Ridgefield stuff. Now, oh, you know what? To Neil's question, if you're in a smaller town, please look. Here's Ridgefield, Branchfield, Georgetown, North Ridgefield, Ridgeberry, South Ridgefield, Titicus, Village Center, West Lane, West Mountain, Whipstick. I know where some of these things are. I've lived here for almost 25 years. And have practiced real estate here for 21 years, right? I know what they mean by some of this, but nobody calls certain areas like Whipstick. That's just like, that's not really a thing. Like West Mountain, sure, but do they mean West Mountain area or do they mean the subdivision of West Mountain Estates, right? Everyone has a different idea of what the village center is, because if you're in town, your house may be worth more, depending on who's coming to buy. So sometimes we see things listed as village center that are, you know, kind of like Dana said about Lower Weston, like there is much village center as you know, downtown Danbury is village center Ridgefield, right? So just remember, when you go by neighborhood, you are relying on your industry's A, level of intelligence, and B, level of efficiency, effectiveness. All right. So the,
Eric,
yes,
sorry to interrupt. To that respect, what I usually do in order to avoid these new categories and confusions, I usually go by miles of within, let's say, 1 mile of particular address, and then the MLS will pick up everything in the area that I'm looking to research.
yes, exactly. That was what Tony put on the table with the radius search. So you can simply use that radius search to solve that that issue.
Rick, can I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
Historically, when you're running these searches, isn't including the distressed properties, the short sales, estates, foreclosures, a problem? And the only reason why I'm asking is because I've actually been in a listing appointment where the seller has asked me the specific question about what types of properties are included in these stats, and I did tell them all of them.
Yeah, and so it's a great question, and so the correct answer is what Lenka said. It is all of them, and I will tell you, for me personally, let me come back to real life here. For me personally, the conversation I would have with the seller at that point is, yes, all of them. Tell me what your concern is, and they say, well, you know, if there's short sales in here, then our house isn't a short sale, and so it's skewing all the numbers. Well, yes, that's right, because short sales skew the market, and you're going to be a part of the market. Just because you're not a short sale doesn't mean that you don't get affected by short sales. Short sales bring the average sale price down sometimes. REOs bring the average sale price down sometimes. That you're not immune from that just because you're not one of those distressed properties, right? So don't think that appraisers will skip a great comp just because it happened to be a short sale. They don't always do that. So I would encourage you to have conversations with sellers that say, yes, these include if asked, these include everything because that's the market you're entering. Some of your competition will be short sales, and that may have an effect on what someone's willing to pay for your house, right? So it's not like there's two markets. It's not like there are buyers out there only searching for distressed and only searching for non-distressed. There's one market, and both distressed and equity sales all get to play in the same arena and are affected by each other positively and negatively.
So when running comps for a property for a buyer, would you include those distressed properties in your comps? And I know that this is different than running the market stats.
Yeah, I think I would. I think if the best sold comp happened to be a short sale, or happened, let's not even go with, let's use short sale. Happened to be a short sale, I would make sure it was one of other equity sales, and use the data point. Here's this one. It happened to be a short sale, because remember, short sale doesn't necessarily mean below market. That at least has not been my experience. Right? All short sales do not sell below market. Some sell at market. Few sell above market, and yet many sell at market. Certainly REO properties, banks don't take a hit. Certainly not when the market is moving as quickly as it is right now, right? REO properties just create a different level of back-end paperwork. They're not sale properties per se. So I think my answer to that, Lenka, would be yes, I would absolutely pull the best comps, mention that so that everyone has the right data, mention that something was a short sale. However, know that when you're looking at it, okay, 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath colonial on an acre in this part of town, boy, that sold for $675. That looks right, like right in the pocket. Or if it sold for $675 and it really looks like it should have been more like $725 or $750, well, then you get to have that conversation. But I don't think I would exclude the data from the table. I think I would include it and then have a conversation where needed or necessary.
Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome. Silva.
I have a completely slight opinion, a different opinion about this, but it's okay. I mean, I usually exclude them. And I have spoken with an appraiser who told me that they look to exclude, especially the distressed properties in terms of foreclosures. In case they have enough of other comps, they would not include a foreclosure in the pool.
Right, and so here's what I want you to always be cognizant of. When you speak to an appraiser, that appraiser is giving you their version of how they do it. How many appraisers do we get to work with? Right, there are as many appraisers as there are real estate agents. And just like there are good ones and bad ones in our industry, there are good ones and bad ones across the appraisal world, and not everybody does it the same. And so I would to me, I would include things and then have conversations around them and let people make their own choices around how they think that affects them. I just think let's put it, because we can kind of go back and forth on this and we're pulled away from the stats, but let's put a period on the end of this conversation by saying that I personally believe it's a mistake to believe that distressed properties don't have an effect on equity sales. Because experience in the last 15 years says absolutely the opposite, that they do have an effect. They are considered, they should be used as data points, even if it means that the equity sale might not be able to be comped the way it would have or could have if those distressed properties didn't exist, because they are real and they are data points. Cool beans. All right, so let's go back and just run quickly the, so we did this year, and now we're going back and just doing last year, right? So now you're going to do 1/1/2020 through 7, what's today? The 9th? 7/9/2021. Actually, just so you know, I usually do my stats early in the morning, and I do them to the day before, because if you use today, I know this might sound silly, but we're only halfway through the day, right? So now you're using all of this year's today, which is halfway through, and all of last year's today, which is a whole day. So I typically do things the day before, just so we have apples to apples. But for argument's sake today, we'll just use today's date. And so you run now last year, the same time period, you click results, you can already see the closed units are way off, right? Because it was all, the matches were only 168. And so now you have 168 versus the 248 from last year. You have the median sale price is going to be crazy different, right? So you have 628 as the average sale price. You have days on market, which was 116 last year versus 64 this year. And you have list to sale ratio of, again, when you do the math, so you're taking average closed price of 751 and you're dividing it by average list price of 783, you get 95.9%. Okay, so now you have last year's numbers and this year's numbers. Let me just, oh, sorry, I keep clicking the wrong damn thing. There we go. Instead of the back button, I keep clicking my stop share button. So I'm sorry if I'm giving you like vertigo with the flashing screen. So now we go back and we have to look at listings taken, right? So let me show you how you do listings taken, because it's a little bit unique for those of you who are unclear about listings taken. So you uncheck the closed. This stuff stays the same up here, right? Because we're comparing single family in Ridgefield and Fairfield County. And you go down here to the bottom, and if you're underneath your results icons, there's typically something that says additional fields. Now, I happen to use listing contract date all the time, so mine just always shows up. However, if you've never used it, you just have to click on this add remove for additional fields, and it will bring you all the additional fields. I mean, there's like 40 billion of them. You can pretty much run searches on just about anything, right? And so you kind of go and you find listing date, I think that's what it's called, listing contract date, and wherever it is that you find it, now because mine's already over here, right? This over here would be on this side. You'd highlight it and click add, and it moves over here to the selected fields. And once you have them selected over here, you just click back and it will show up at the bottom of your search. Everyone clear about how to use that? And then you'll just simply run the same search. So 1121 plus gives you 350. So listings taken this year, 350. Last year, $413. You see how I did that? Because it just shows up right here. You don't have to do anything else. I'm just looking for a units count. So is everyone clear on how I got the numbers using the MLS to kind of do this review? Okay. And so now I just want to make sure that you know how to interpret them. So not on the MLS just yet. So closed units, if you looked, we had 248 this year and we had 168 last year. So here's how you do the math on that. You subtract you're going to want to find the difference, right? So you've got 168, which was last year, minus this year's 248 in closed units. So that's a differential of 80. And then you're going to divide by where you started. And when I say where you started, I mean the 2020, not the 2021, because you started in 2020 and you're moving to 2021. So you divide by the 168.
Rick, I'm sorry, I don't see your screen.
You're right. I'm just talking now.
Showing the numbers.
Right? So the differential, 248 and 168 is 80. And then you're going to divide by where you started, the number that was further back, right? Your foundation number of 168. And that gives you a number of 47.6. Well, clearly 168 is lower than 248. So you're on an upward trajectory. So you are 47.6% higher in 2021 than you were in 2020 at this point in the year in closed units in the town of Ridgefield, single family. You see how I did that? And you can check the math by doing 168, which is where you started, multiplied by 1.476, which would be an increase of 47.6%, and you get 248 units. So that's just how I quick check my math. Right, and then we're going to move to listings taken. We had 350 this year versus 413 the previous year. So 413 minus 350 is 63 divided by where we started, which was 413. So you have a decrease from 413 down to 350 of 15.3%. Y'all see how I'm doing this?
Yes.
Okay. If percentages and fractions and decimals wasn't your strong suit in school, it's easy to get this confused, right? So I'm going to do it a couple more times so you hear the formula, right? Days on market was 116 and now it's 64. So the differential is 52 divided by the original number of 116. You have a decrease of days on market by 44.8%. And then average sale price, we were at 628. We're now at 783. So you subtract one from the other, you get 155. You divide by the 628, which is where you started. You get an increase of average sale price of 24.7%. And again, to check the math, 628 times 1.267 equals the 783. Questions, comments, concerns about the math I'm doing?
The math makes sense, but where'd you get those numbers? Was it from the original search that you were doing in
Yeah,
Ridgefield?
so I did the 2021 search, year to date 2021. Then we went and we answered the questions about Stanford. Then I came back and ran the 2020 in
Got it.
Ridgefield, right? And so we're comparing year to date 2020 to year to date 2021, those two periods of time. That's where I got those numbers.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. And so what do some of these numbers actually tell you? Let's just have that quick conversation, because I want to make sure that you know how to use these numbers. What does closed units year over year up 47% actually mean? What does it tell you? What does it tell the seller?
More is selling.
A whole lot more houses this year than last year.
Right, so we've sold a whole ton more houses. More may be selling. We'd have to dig a little deeper to make sure that as a percentage of what was on the market last year, that is actually true, that more are selling, right? Units wise, that is 100% true. We'd have to see from a market analysis perspective, was it, if this year 350 out of 700 sold, and last year 413 out of, what's the point I'm trying to make? You see what I'm saying, right? So the percentage could be off.
Yeah, you have to see how it relates to what the whole market is doing, how many
Right.
listings are on at a given time.
However, just looking at the numbers themselves, the raw numbers, we're definitely selling more property, right? So why is that good news or bad news or no news to a seller?
More likely that their house would sell this year versus last year? I
Yeah,
guess.
we're simply selling more properties, right? So if we brush you with that same stroke, there's a 47.6% better likelihood that you will sell your house this year than there was last year. Right? So listings taken down, whatever that number was, 27 or so %. What is that telling us?
Low inventory.
Right? So it's telling us low inventory. Why does that matter to a seller?
Good time to put your house on the market.
How come?
Because houses are selling at a 47% increase over last year, and yet there's a lot less houses. So it's even more likely that your house would sell.
Right. So let's translate that into fewer competitors, right?
Okay.
You have less competition.
Mhm.
You have less competition. And if the buying pool was the same as last year and you have less competition, what does that mean potentially for your bottom line?
Higher price.
You could command a higher price if in fact those assumptions are true. What do we know about the buying pool? Are there more buyers this year than last year?
Yes.
Can we prove it? Aha.
I don't know.
How do we know that? How would we
So-
know if there's more people looking or less people looking than last year?
So it's a great question, which is why I asked it, right? We don't. It feels like there are because people are backlogged with buyers because the inventory is lower. There isn't a metric from the MLS that we can actually grab that says this is how many buyers were looking last year versus how many buyers are looking this year, because we don't log clients. We only log sales, right? So it's possible that there are the same number of buyers, just fewer listings, and so we're seeing these results. It's possible there are more buyers and there are fewer listings, which is why we're seeing the kind of anomaly of insanity that we have. But those are all more guesses than they are things that you can actually prove. So I'm just trying to make a point about statistics being able to you can stand firmly on some of these statistics. Some of them allow for more speculation than not. And so you'll have to decide whether or not you'll utilize more speculative ideas based on these numbers, or stick with what the numbers actually tell us based on what we can measure. Yes, Silva.
I was thinking of keeping current matters. They provide some kind of statistics but you are right, it could be just speculation. And also the fact that we now have less restrictions, we definitely have higher traffic, but we cannot really be certain what is the reason for that. So, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's interesting, right? When you start to really, ask yourself the question, right? When you're prepping yourself for a market conversation, ask yourself, what can I prove versus what am I guessing at? And it's okay if some of them are guesses, as long as you say to the seller, you know, so Silva, here's what we know. The assumption is that this showed up because of X, Y, or Z, right? And that's okay to say. I'm not saying don't use some of those speculative ideas. I just want you to know the difference between what is factual, this minus this divided by that gives you these numbers, versus our interpretation of them, right? Because the buy side, the only way we understand the buyer side locally, and frankly, I don't think there's any MLS or board across the country that has every agent log every buyer they're working with, right? That information just doesn't exist. The reason we have it clearly on the listing side is because, or on the selling side, is because listings are what we post to the marketplace. And here's the other interesting piece. How many of you have sold something off market in the last 12 months? Right? So there's more of that going on than I think ever, certainly in the history of my career. Now, are the numbers big enough to really make up, to skew these conversations? No, probably not. And yet, it's something to consider. What does median sale price jumping up, whatever we said, 25%, what does that tell you?
It shows us that more expensive houses are selling than less expensive houses.
Yeah, so the idea of the median sale price kind of ticking up is a good thing, because generally speaking, the median sale price kind of brings everybody along with them. It means people are spending more money on housing in this particular town, in this particular segment for single family housing, as compared to the same time period last year. Right, and what's interesting is that if you really wanted to do like a deep dive in all this, you can run these things monthly and say, okay, so how is it tracking? What's the, like, are we seeing it climb every month? Are we seeing it kind of flatten out? Are we seeing it decline? You can kind of step things back. If you were looking for trending, you could run January versus January. You could run January, February versus January, February, January, February, March versus January, February, March, right? You could start getting nutty about what you were running to see what the trend lines might be. I was doing that for some of your sellers when you guys asked me for some help last summer, a couple of you. I was doing that for some sellers who ultimately were asking the question, like, what is the trend line? Because they were on the market in June of last year. Man, that was a weird time to be on the market, right? Because we didn't have a whole lot of data. It was a lot of gut and a lot of feeling. Because the previous 60 to 75 days, we were just coming out of like the shutdown. And so were those really valid numbers? I don't know. I still think we need another 2 or 3 months this year under our belt for everything to even out, right? Because right now, 50% of the numbers that we're comparing this year to last year were during the shutdown period last year, right? That there's no precedent for that. And so we're not really comparing apples to apples from a market perspective. And yet the numbers are the numbers. And it's always, the process doesn't change. And what I'm really here to show you today is the process. All right, what didn't we cover that you wanted to be certain that we did? Did I answer at least the questions that were put on the table to be answered?
Yes, this was super helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Niels, did you get what you were looking for in terms of how to pull the stuff that you were asking about?
Absolutely. In fact, I'm just chatting with Margaret right now, being like, now we have our homework on Monday. We're meeting in Westport to do some of this work.
Excellent, excellent, excellent.
So thank you.
You're quite welcome. And I think those were the two that got put on there. Oh, and I think, Margaret, you asked for more generalized conversations. Did we cover that as well?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. It's super helpful.
Sure. Any last thing before we, I probably have another 4 minutes or so that we can, I can spend. Anybody have a last question or a last stat you want to figure out how to pull?
Rick, this was more about past, closed, and stats. Would you do the same kind of thing for active, or looking for active homes? Or is not much to do, just search around and poke around for what you're looking for?
I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that,
Well,
Frank. Keep asking me.
If you have a potential interested person in selling a home and doing a comp, for example.
Yeah, so is the question, how are we finding comps for a potential seller?
Yes.
Got it. Okay, so let me pop back here and I will show you that real quick. So here's how I do it. Now, again, remember there's a bunch of different ways that you can do pretty much everything. However, let's just keep it as single family in Ridgefield, and say say the subject property is a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath, 2,800 square foot colonial in sort of mid-range look condition, just to keep it simple, right? And so the very first thing I'm going to do is skew my closings down to if I can at all help it, the last 90 days. I know that people like to look at the last 6 months. I will tell you that my personal opinion is if you can find great comps in the last 90 days, you're going to get a better number to work with, because 90 to 180 days from ago from where we are today, the market still hadn't really caught up to what was going on. In the last 30, 60, 90 days, the market was starting to finally catch up with all of the over asking and whatnot. And so I think the tighter you keep it, the more accurate you can be. I mean, frankly, if things are closing at a good clip in the town that you're comping in, find the best 3 sold comps in the last 30 or 60 days, right? Run it for 90. And if you can find 6 or so, 4 or 5 or 6 comps, pick the best 3 that are the most relevant and the closest to today's date, because you'll get better information. So I don't go back 6 months unless I absolutely have to. I go back 3 months and then start going 4, 5, 6 if I can't find valid comps.
And only closed, right? Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, sir. Closed is the ticket, because that's what the appraisers will do. That won't mean that you won't look at active, because you want to see what the competition is, right? So as a balancing act, but if you're choosing the best 3 sold comps, you're going to stay right squarely here in closed, ideally in 90 days. The next thing that I'll do is, of course, choose the town. I'll then look to see what style it is, because for the most part, you're going to comp the same style with the same style. Right, there are a couple of exceptions to that. So I said a colonial, right? So you want to comp colonials with colonials. You don't want to comp colonials with ranches, right? Sometimes a raised ranch and a split can be used as comps for each other. Sometimes, if you really can't find anything else, larger capes or more traditional contemporaries might be able to be substituted for a colonial. But I don't necessarily advise going cross style. Right? Most appraisers won't unless there's absolutely nothing else. But those are some of the ones that you might be able to get away with for the right house. If you're comping a contemporary, you want to search for some contemporaries, because contemporaries are just a different animal in New England than they are perhaps in other parts of the country, right? And so you want to kind of stay in that lane as much as you possibly can. Square footage. So total square feet, I said 2,800, right? So I'm going to go a little less than that, maybe 2,500 to 3,000, and see what I get. I'm just going to broaden the range a little bit to make sure that I'm pulling things that are above and below, because great comps might not be exactly 2,800 square feet. And then I said a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath colonial is my subject property. So I'm going to say 3+ on the bedrooms, and I'm going to say 2+ on the bathrooms. And that's pretty much, why am I getting 0? Oh, because I think I still have something down here. There we go. Make sure that you don't have other fields asking for information that might be problematic like I just did.
Rick, would you not include the garage?
So I do not, when I look for comps, this is all I do. I do town for the last 90 days, style, a range of square footage, and close to bedrooms and baths. And I almost always go just below the bedrooms, baths, so I'm getting a larger range. And that's all I do. And then I see, okay, I have 9 matches here. So then I'll pull those 9 matches and I'll look at each of these one by one to start to say, okay, the house I'm comping does have a 2-car garage. These 3 do, these 3 don't. So these might be better. If they are better for everything else, well, then I'm going to use them over these because they do have the garage. But I don't use that as a point of elimination. And I appreciate you asking that, Lenka, because here's why. What I've noticed over time is that if you get too specific with your search criteria, you sometimes eliminate what could be really good comps with just a small maybe garage adjustment or a small whatever finished lower level adjustment, you know, that really makes sense other than the fact that one has a 1-car and one has a 2-car. So I like to kind of see them and then use my eyeballs to include or exclude.
I always thought another big one was acreage. I just would not dare put the subject property that's 0.2 on an acreage to compare anything that's over 1 acre as a good comp, but that's just me.
Yeah, see, and what's interesting is that I will look at that, but unless we're talking about subdividable lots, somebody who has a 1/2 acre versus somebody who has an acre or an acre and a half, if the acre and a half is not subdividable, it's just more land. And to me, that becomes A, they're paying more taxes, B, they have more expense to maintain it. So it's not necessarily worth more or worth less. It's a saleability issue. And so I don't look necessarily at land as, now it's one thing if somebody has a 1/4 of an acre in town and we're comping it with somebody who has 3 acres up in the north part of town where it's, you know, it's more open. I would agree that there's maybe a balancing act when it's that egregious. But again, unless you're talking about a building lot, something subdividable with a building lot, well, that might be worth more with some extra land. Other than that, I tend to look at it more as a saleability option, and I don't use it as a criteria to narrow this list. I might use it as a criteria when I'm looking at them one by one. To Lenka's point, clearly, if my subject property has an acre and there are 3 decent comps on here, all with an acre, and everybody else has 2 or 3 acres, well, then I might be choosing the ones with 1 acre. But again, I'm not pushing it into the criteria just because I don't want to eliminate other things for me to look at and make decisions with my brain. I think the point I'm trying to make is I like to make the decisions about what I'm excluding versus having the computer do it. So I like to go bigger and then go one by one and say, yeah, no, maybe, put that aside, no, yes, maybe, instead of having the computer not give me that opportunity.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
You're quite welcome. And then here's the other point to make. If in fact, by doing this kind of broad brush stroke of comps, you know, this number down here isn't 9, but it's like 52. Well, then I'm going to start tightening up my criteria because 52, I'm not necessarily going to go through 52 of these, right? Sometimes if that's the case and the price ranges are from 400 to $1 million in the 52, and I pretty much know that we're talking about a 650, 750 house, well, then I may go up here and say, okay, only tell me about the ones that are kind of between, you know, 550 and 850. So I'll go 100 north and 100 south to skew things down a little. Oh, look, now I only have 19 to go through. Okay, well, I can go through 19, but I'm not going one by one through 52 of them. So again, all I'm saying is use the sorting or the limiting criteria to get yourself into a number that you can go ahead one by one. But I think I personally trust myself more than I trust my fingers. And what I mean by that is I'd rather see them and exclude them than put something into a search field here and miss something that the computer doesn't think is a comp, even though I might. And then Frank, to finish up this conversation, whoops. I don't know what I did. Oh, here we go. To finish up this conversation, then I would literally go open each and every single one of these. Okay, what does Mimosa look like? What do the pictures look like? Okay, so updated kitchen, mine has an updated kitchen. This might be a better comp. Let's keep this one out. I'll look through and see how it compares. I'll read through to see how it might compare. I will go through each of the pictures. If there's a video attached, I'll take a look at that, right? I'll see where it is in relation to the subject property, right? Just kind of looking at all of it. I'll look at the assessed value just in case. I'm not using any one of these as a criteria, right? The land, the garages, the taxes, the assessments. But I'm going through each and every one of them saying yes, no, maybe, yes, no, maybe, and working things down from that way. And I'll tell you the way I do it. I then come here. And so if I say yes, no, no, maybe, yes, yes, no, no, and no, well, I'm going to check the ones that are yes or maybe, and then I'm going to refine the search. So now the check boxes, I click refine and narrow, and now my list gets shortened to only the ones I've checked. So I don't have to worry about the ones that I said no to. Right, and now I'll open up these and go, okay, now I need 3. So where do I think I want to be? What are the numbers telling me? What are the best 3 sold comps? Right, in this scenario, maybe now, because I've narrowed it down, I look and see, you know what, McKeon Place, it is only on 1/4 of an acre, and it's on 1/4 of an acre because it's in this subdivision all the way in North Ridgefield that are really more like, almost like attached single family units. And so it's really leans towards condo. So it's not really like these that are more on an acre apiece. So I may then decide, yeah, you know what, I'm getting rid of that one. I'll narrow that down. And then there are my 3 sold comps. So that was kind of a quick version of how I personally choose my comps. Did that help, Frank?
Yes, absolutely. And because you're not trying to come up with a set price, you're not even going to get into like price per square foot and calculating that against the square footage of your potential seller.
Yeah,
so get those 3 closest comps and put it in front of them.
That's right. I will tell you that price per square foot, I'm always prepared with it. I like to just do the once I choose my best 3 sold comps, I will then go and do the price per square foot just so I know it in case it comes up in conversation. However, I don't ever use it as a proactive conversation. I shouldn't say never. There might be certain circumstances where it might make sense, but generally speaking, in this part of the world, right, our inventory is far too eclectic to, and I mean that in every way that you can think of that. It's eclectic in style, it's eclectic in age, it's eclectic in there's just too much difference between the houses that we deal with on a daily basis to be able to say, well, since that one sold for $120 a square foot, that's what this should be. We'll just take that multiplier and multiply it by the square footage, and it doesn't work that way. We don't have communities for the most part that make sense like that. Whereas in other parts of the country where you have communities of 500 or 1,000 houses, and the only difference is this one has an upgraded appliance package, and this one has this is the Washington package. So the garage is on the other side and it has a deck, and the other one does. That's where price per square foot kind of comes into play more than what we deal with here, if that's helpful.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. However, always know what it is. I always had a page of notes because I got called out on it one time by somebody who had finished literally every square footage of their property and thought that the best way for him to price his house was to find out the average price per square foot and then just multiply his square footage. Well, sure. When you did it that way, his house was worth probably $300,000 more than what it really ultimately sold for. So he was working an angle. Had I done the math up front and had the answers, I could have helped him through why that might have been a less relevant way to calculate things. However, I wasn't prepared. And the mistake I made in that moment was, because I got caught with my pants down, I said, you know what, Mr. Seller, let me do this. Let me go and do that homework for you. And we'll set an appointment for me to come back later today or tomorrow, and we can have that follow-up conversation. And I left. That wasn't a good decision on my part, because I never got my foot back in the door. I should have just figured it out while I had him with me, even if I sounded like a dork. So at that moment forward, I always at least had the math done and a calc sheet to say, if we go down that path, here's what the comps say, here's what the industry says, here's the conversation we can have around that. So I at least wasn't out the door, if that makes sense.
Rick, I just want to triple check. I was told that when calculating price per square foot, you should not account for the basement lower level of any kind, whether finished or unfinished. I just want to confirm that's accurate.
Yeah, so it's a great question. I'll tell you what I've always done is I've taken the, I don't know what the appraiser's rule is on that, to be honest. I probably should. I passed the appraiser's exam, but I don't know the answer to that from an appraisal perspective. I always looked at having conversations with sellers. I would give them half credit for finished lower levels, right? So if it was below grade and it was 1,000 square feet, I would look at it and work in another 500 or so square feet of livable, heated square footage, such that there was some kind of a balance. They're not getting full credit, but they're not getting no credit. That always worked. Now, when I say that, Linka, I don't mean necessarily officially. So it wasn't necessarily what will go in the MLS, but when I was finding comps and trying to have conversations around positioning and value, that's how I did it. I used half value for the lower level just to have them feel like they were getting some kind of credit.
I would really like to know what the official calculation there is, because especially working with buyers, investors, they want to know their numbers. And sometimes I feel awkward being in a property that has, a good square footage in a lower level that's finished, by me telling them, really, I can't account this for the price per square foot calculation. And in fact, that's what I've been told over the years. And I really just would like that confirmed.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm happy to ask an appraiser friend of mine what his thought is, and I can certainly circle back to you guys with it.
Thank you.
You're
I had to
welcome.
call the town once just to find out. And they were saying to a lot, like 70% of the value for the basement, because that's what they were doing to account for the taxes.
Yeah, and what's interesting, that's a great tip, Julie. And the caution I'll throw on that one is, when you say the town, every town's going to give you a slightly different answer on that.
Exactly. I was going to say, call each town for whatever property you're going to use.
Exactly right. Yeah, let's face it, there's a lot of things in our industry that we want black or white answers, and oftentimes they simply don't exist. And so we kind of have to play the middle. That's why I always liked the idea of half credit. Julie's saying some towns are 70% credit. I will ask the question of the appraiser that I know what his answer is, and go from there. All right, guys. I am unfortunately out of time. I hope this was a help for you. Have a great weekend. Be safe. List and sell a lot of houses. Enjoy your families. And I will see you again bright and early on Monday morning, 9 o'clock. See ya.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Rick.